My name is Claire Whitman. I'm 32 years old, and I'm writing this from a hotel room that was supposed to be my honeymoon suite. The wedding was supposed to be tomorrow. Instead, I'm sitting alone with a glass of whiskey I didn't even know how to order properly, staring at a city skyline I thought would mark the beginning of my married life, and feeling something unexpected beneath the ache. Relief. Let me explain how everything unraveled so cleanly, so publicly, and so permanently. I'd been with my fiancé, Evan Montgomery, for 4 years. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, one of those crowded apartment gatherings where everyone's holding red cups and pretending they don't care who's watching. Evan was charming without trying too hard, smart, confident, the kind of man who could talk to anyone and make it feel effortless. We clicked immediately. Dating turned serious fast. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. After 2 years, we moved in together. Last October, during a weekend trip I thought was just a break from work, he proposed. I said yes without hesitation. I genuinely believed I'd found my person. Evan's parents, though, that was more complicated. They were never openly cruel. That would have been easier to spot. They were cordial. His father, Richard, was a retired pharmaceutical executive. His mother, Margaret, came from old money and ran a charity foundation with her maiden name etched onto every plaque. They lived in one of those gated communities where the lawns are perfect and no one ever seems to notice the help. I'm an electrical engineer. I make decent money, around $115,000 a year. I own a modest townhouse, drive a reliable Honda, have retirement savings, and a middle-class upbringing I'm proud of. My parents are both teachers. Good people, honest people. Every interaction with Evan's parents felt like a performance review I never passed. Richard would ask about my 5-year plan like we were in a boardroom. Margaret would comment on how quaint my townhouse was, how interesting it was that I came from such a humble background. I brushed it off. Evan always defended them. They're just traditional. They don't mean it like that. They'll warm up eventually. I wanted to believe him. The rehearsal dinner was last night. A beautiful restaurant, private room, about 40 people, both families, the wedding party, close friends. My parents had flown in from 3 states away. My best friend took time off work. Everyone was dressed up, smiling, toasting our future. About an hour in, just after the appetizers were cleared, Richard stood and clinked his glass. I smiled. I genuinely thought this was going to be a welcome to the family speech. Before we get too deep into the festivities, he began, I think it's important we address something that's been weighing on us. Margaret nodded beside him, lips pressed tight, like she was bracing for a corporate announcement. We've tried to be supportive of this relationship, he continued. We really have, but we need to be honest. Here, in front of everyone who matters. The room went still. You're not really one of us, he said, looking directly at me. You don't fit our family values. I could hear someone's fork hit their plate. Our son comes from a certain background, certain expectations, and while you seem like a nice enough young woman, we don't believe you can provide the life he deserves. Margaret leaned forward. This isn't cruelty, it's honesty. You'll never truly belong in our circles, and frankly, we're concerned about what this marriage would do to our family's reputation. I turned to Evan. He was staring at his plate, silent, not defending me, not stopping them, not even looking at me. His sister was smirking. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father's jaw tightened so hard I thought he might crack a tooth. We're offering you an out, Richard concluded. No hard feelings. We'll handle the cancellation costs. Just walk away now, and everyone can save face. 40 people watched me, waiting, for me to apologize, to beg, to shrink. Instead, something inside me finally clicked. 4 years of backhanded comments, 4 years of Evan making excuses, 4 years of being tolerated, never embraced. I stood up slowly. Thank you for your honesty, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I appreciate you finally saying out loud what you've been implying for years. Richard's smug smile flickered. You're right, I continued. I don't fit your family values, because my family values include basic human decency and not humiliating someone at their own wedding event. The room froze. So I'll take you up on that offer, I said. The wedding is canceled. Evan finally looked up, not because he was angry, because he was shocked. Not because I'm not good enough for your son, I said, turning toward him, but because I've realized he's not good enough for me. A partner who sits in silence while his parents publicly degrade the woman he claims to love is not someone I want to spend my life with. I turned to my parents. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry you had to witness this. Let's go. We walked out. Behind me, Evan finally spoke. Wait, please, we can talk about this. His parents said nothing, and that silence told me everything. The strangest part of walking out of that restaurant wasn't the sound of chairs scraping or the sudden hush of 40 people pretending they didn't know where to look. It was how light my body felt the moment the door closed behind us. Like I'd been holding my breath for 4 years, and only now realized it. Outside, the air was cold enough to sting. My mother's hand found my elbow, trembling. My father stayed quiet, the way he does when he's trying not to say something that could scorch the earth. My best friend Hannah was already beside us. No questions, no pity, just presence, steady and loyal, like a wall you can lean on when everything collapses. We drove back to my parents' hotel because the idea of returning to the townhouse, our townhouse technically, felt unbearable. Not because I feared Evan would be there, but because I feared what I'd see. Wedding boxes, place cards, the half-finished seating chart on the dining table. Proof of a future that had evaporated in one speech. In the hotel room, my mom cried. Not the dramatic kind. Quiet, shaking sobs that came in waves. "I'm sorry," I said, sitting beside her on the bed. She wiped her face, eyes red. "I'm not crying because you're not getting married, Claire." That sentence landed like a stone. "I'm crying because they looked at you like you were disposable," she whispered, "and because they looked at us like we were something they had to tolerate." My father, who never raises his voice, paced once, then stopped at the window like he needed distance from his own rage. "They are the most pathetic excuse for human beings I've ever met," he said, each word controlled, like he was trying not to explode. Hearing him say it made my throat tighten. "Because my dad is the kind of man who says please to cashiers and apologizes when someone bumps into him. If he called you pathetic, it meant you'd done something truly rotten." That night, my phone lit up like a fire alarm. Texts, calls, voicemails. Evan, his sister, mutual friends. Some relatives I barely knew, probably pulled into it like spectators. I didn't respond. Not because I was playing games. Because if I responded, I'd have to entertain the possibility that this was a misunderstanding. And it wasn't. I stared at the ceiling long after my parents fell asleep. My mom's quiet sniffles had stopped, but I could still feel her heartbreak in the air. I kept replaying the dinner. Richard's tone, polished, almost gracious, like he was doing me a favor. Margaret's smile, tight and self-satisfied. Evan's silence, and the way his sister smirked, like she'd been waiting for it. That wasn't an outburst. That was a plan. The next morning, reality became numbers. The wedding wasn't just a heartbreak. It was contracts, deposits, money that had taken me years to save. And here's the part that made me almost laugh in the middle of my own misery. I had paid for 70% of it. Evan's parents had offered to contribute, but every offer came with a string. "We'll pay for the flowers, but they have to be from this florist. We'll cover the band, but it has to be this band. We'll handle the rehearsal dinner. Don't worry about it." It was never generosity. It was control disguised as a gift. So I'd said, "Forget it. I'll handle most of it myself." Total wedding cost, around $48,000. My portion, about $34,000. Evan's contribution was minimal, small payments here and there, like he wanted credit without carrying weight. His parents' grand total? $300. The rehearsal dinner, the very dinner they used as a stage to humiliate me. I sat at the little desk in the hotel room with my laptop open, staring at vendor emails and cancellation policies. Most vendors don't refund deposits this close to the event, especially not the week of. I was looking at losing a significant chunk of my savings. And I won't lie, my stomach twisted. Not because I cared about the wedding party anymore, but because that money represented something deeper. Stability, safety, years of careful planning. Evan hadn't just let his parents insult me. He'd let them blow up something I had built with my own hands. I started making calls. Not dramatic calls, not screaming ones. Calm, steady calls. The kind you make when you're determined not to let someone else's cruelty bankrupt you. The venue coordinator listened quietly as I explained. I didn't embellish, I didn't beg. I just told the truth. There was a pause. Then she said softly, "I'm so sorry. That sounds like you dodged a bullet." She couldn't refund the deposit, but she offered to hold a credit for a future event. A future event. That phrase made my chest ache and warm at the same time, because it meant she believed I still had one. The caterer was less flexible, but when I mentioned I might be able to transfer the deposit to someone else's event, they worked with me. Hannah, bless her, had an upcoming engagement party for her brother. She agreed to take the deposit, and her brother paid me back. Net neutral. The photographer shocked me the most. She'd seen situations like mine before. "Contracts exist," she said gently, "but so does humanity." She gave me a 50% refund, more than she was required to. By the end of 3 days, I'd recovered about $12,000. Still lost around $22,000. That hurt. But you know what hurt more? The idea of marrying into that family. Money can be rebuilt. A life tied to people who think humiliation is honesty. That would have cost me my dignity in installments. By day 4, Evan's messages shifted. At first, they were frantic, then angry, then manipulative. You humiliated me in front of everyone. My parents were just being protective. You overreacted. We can still fix this. Please, just talk to me. The way he wrote you humiliated me, like I'd been the aggressor, made my hands shake. I didn't respond. Then his sister texted. This one felt like poison wrapped in glitter. You know you made a huge scene for nothing, right? My parents were just being honest. You should be thanking them for the reality check. Now Evan's devastated, and it's your fault. My thumb hovered over the screen. I replied once. Your parents called me and my family worthless in front of 40 people. Evan said nothing. We're done here. Then I blocked her. Mutual friends reached out next. The Switzerland crowd. People who want to feel morally superior by understanding both sides. I heard what happened. That's rough, but are you sure you didn't overreact? They're intense, but they mean well. Maybe if you just apologized. Apologized. For what? For having teacher parents? For not inheriting a trust fund? For being the wrong kind of woman in the wrong kind of room? I stopped responding to them too. And just when I thought the worst of it was over, it escalated. 3 days after the rehearsal dinner, a certified letter arrived at my townhouse from Evan's parents' attorney, demanding I reimburse them for the $3,000 rehearsal dinner, $5,000 for emotional distress caused to their son, $2,500 for the non-refundable portion of Evan's wedding suit, $1,200 for bachelor party expenses they covered. Total, $11,700. I stared at the numbers like they were a joke. The audacity was almost impressive. They humiliated me publicly, torpedoed the wedding, and now wanted me to pay them like I'd committed a crime. My hands were cold as I called my cousin, Melissa, who works as a paralegal. She skimmed the letter, and then she laughed. Not a mean laugh. You've got to be kidding me laugh. Claire, she said, this is barely legal intimidation. They have no grounds. The rehearsal dinner was a gift, she continued. No repayment terms. Emotional distress? They caused the situation. This is them trying to bully you into submission. Then we ignore it? There was a pause. Melissa's voice sharpened, practical and protective. We respond, she said, professionally, factual, devastating. Because by then, I didn't just want peace. I wanted a record. I wanted every threat documented, every lie pinned to paper. So we drafted a response. Dear counsel, your client's claims are without merit. The rehearsal dinner contribution was a gift with no repayment terms. The wedding suit and related expenses were purchased for your client's son and are not my financial obligation. Claims of emotional distress are particularly ironic, given that your clients initiated a public confrontation that ended the engagement in front of approximately 40 witnesses. Any further frivolous communication will be considered harassment. This matter is closed. We sent it certified mail. Return receipt requested. And for the first time since the dinner, I felt something close to control again. But Evan wasn't done. Sunday afternoon, I was back at my townhouse for the first time in days. The place smelled faintly like the candle Evan's mom had gifted us last Christmas, something expensive and floral that always gave me a headache. Hannah was with me, sitting on the couch like a guard dog disguised as a friend. We were watching football, trying to pretend my life hadn't imploded. Then the doorbell rang. My body knew before my mind did. When I opened the door, Evan was standing there. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Hair unwashed, eyes red, hands shaking like he'd been rehearsing this moment and still didn't know what to do with it. We need to talk, he said. I didn't move. There's nothing to talk about. Please, he whispered. Just 5 minutes. I deserve that after 4 years. Behind me, Hannah shifted slightly, ready. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. Talk. Evan started crying immediately. Not pretty crying. Ugly, desperate sobs. I'm so sorry, he said. I should have said something. I was in shock. You don't understand what they're like, how they control everything. But I love you. I want to fix this. I stared at him, and for a flicker of a second, I almost believed him. Almost. Then I remembered the dinner. I remembered his silence, and the way his parents stayed silent too, when he finally begged me to reconsider. Where were they? I said quietly, when you asked me to stop, when you finally spoke up. He blinked. What? At the restaurant, I said. When you finally looked at me and said, wait. When you finally tried to choose me. My voice shook on the next words. Your parents sat there in silence. Evan's mouth opened, then closed. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice low. They didn't try to stop me. They didn't apologize. They didn't look surprised. I swallowed. They got exactly what they wanted. Evan shook his head fast. No, they were shocked, I swear. They planned it, I cut in. His face froze. Your dad had notes, I said. On a napkin. I saw it when he sat back down. Evan's breath caught like I'd slapped him. That wasn't shock, I whispered. That was strategy. His face crumpled. They thought they were protecting me, he said, voice cracking. From what? I snapped, louder now. From a woman who loved you, who was going to spend her life with you. He reached for my hand. I pulled back. Your parents think I'm beneath them, I said, and you let them treat me that way for 4 years. Evan whispered, I'll cut them off. I'll choose you, please. For half a heartbeat, the old version of me, the woman who wanted this to work, stood up inside my chest. But the new version of me was already stronger. You've had 4 years to choose me, I said, voice deadly calm. You never did. He sobbed harder. Claire! Goodbye, I said. I went back inside, locked the door. Through the window, I watched him stand there for 10 minutes, like a man waiting for someone to reverse time. Then a car pulled up, his sister. She got out, grabbed his arm, and pulled him toward the passenger seat like she was collecting something that belonged to her. Hannah handed me a beer without saying anything. My hands shook as I took it. You okay? She asked softly. I looked around the townhouse. Half mine, half haunted. Getting there, I said. And I meant it. Because for the first time, I wasn't begging to be accepted. I was learning how to walk away without apologizing. I thought the porch conversation would be the end of it. That once Evan really saw what he'd lost, he'd retreat into shame, lick his wounds, and let silence do what it always does, settle things. I underestimated entitlement. The next week wasn't loud at first. It was slippery, like the truth was being quietly bent while I wasn't looking. It started with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in months, acquaintances, distant friends, the kind of people who suddenly care deeply when drama gives them something to discuss over coffee. I heard what happened. That must have been so intense. Are you doing okay? Someone said you had a bit of a breakdown. I'm just checking in. People are worried about you. A breakdown. That word stuck. Because nothing about what I'd done was impulsive. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't thrown a glass. I hadn't insulted anyone. I stood up, spoke clearly, and left. But somewhere, quietly, efficiently, the story had changed. Evan's parents, I learned, were telling people that I couldn't handle constructive criticism. Constructive, like being told you don't belong and never will in front of 40 people, was feedback you're supposed to thank someone for. Richard was apparently saying I'd proved their concerns right by walking out dramatically. Margaret had gone one step further. She told someone I had always been emotionally fragile and that stress brought out instability. Instability. That one almost made me laugh. Because I'm the woman who manages million-dollar infrastructure projects without blinking. The woman who plans vacations down to backup itineraries. The woman who paid for 70% of her own wedding because she didn't like relying on anyone else's money. But in their version of events, I was hysterical, unhinged, unreliable. And Evan, he didn't correct them. I found that out when a mutual friend, someone I actually trusted, called me late one night. I don't want it to be the middle, she said carefully, but Evan's having a really hard time. He says he froze, that he didn't realize how bad it sounded until afterward. Did he tell you he apologized? I asked. Yes, she said, and that he offered to choose you. And did he tell you when? I asked. There was a pause. After you left? I closed my eyes. Then he didn't choose me, I said quietly. He reacted to consequences. Silence. I just thought, she tried again, maybe if you two talked. No, I said gently. I talked for 4 years. After that, I stopped answering calls altogether. But the escalation didn't stop. It just changed shape. 3 days later, I got an alert from my bank. Someone had attempted to log into my account. Wrong password. Then another attempt. Locked out. My heart slammed against my ribs. I changed every password immediately. Enabled two-factor authentication everywhere. Email, banking, cloud storage, everything. That's when I realized something I should have caught earlier. Evan still had access to one of my streaming accounts. Same password as my email. I'd been careless because I trusted him. That mistake could have cost me far more than money. I monitored my credit, froze it temporarily, pulled reports. No damage done. But the intention? That was loud. 2 days later, I got a call from HR. Not a formal meeting, just a check-in. Hey, Claire, my manager said. We wanted to let you know, someone reached out asking questions about you, claimed to be a reference checker from another company. My stomach dropped. I'm not job hunting, I said. That's what we figured, he replied. They asked about your reliability, your temperament, your professionalism. Temperament. I felt heat crawl up my neck. HR shut it down, he continued. We don't give out information to unverified callers, but I thought you should know. I thanked him, hung up, and sat very still. Because now this wasn't emotional. It was strategic. Someone, either Evan or his parents, was trying to destabilize my life. Not just punish me for leaving, but discredit me. I opened a document and started a timeline. Dates, times, messages, attempts. The attorney letter, the bank alerts, the HR call, everything. That night, I emailed Melissa again, along with a family lawyer friend she recommended. Their advice was immediate and unanimous. This is harassment. Start building a paper trail. Formal cease and desist. So that's what I did. The letter went to Evan's parents' address. It outlined the public humiliation at the rehearsal dinner, the frivolous legal demand, attempts to access my private accounts, unauthorized inquiries into my employment, harassment of my parents, and it included something they didn't know I had, documentation. Because when Evan showed up on my porch, my phone was recording in my pocket. When Margaret called my parents to scold my mother for raising a vindictive daughter, my father recorded it. Our state is one-party consent. Everything was legal. Everything was time-stamped. The letter ended with a simple sentence. Any further contact will result in legal action, including a request for a restraining order. Within 48 hours of that letter landing, Richard called me directly. I didn't answer at first. Then he called again and again. Finally, I picked up. This is getting out of hand, he said sharply. We need to meet like adults and discuss this. There's nothing to discuss, I replied. Your family has harassed me, attempted to access my accounts, and tried to damage my career. You're being unreasonable, he snapped. We were trying to protect our son. Goodbye, I said. And I hung up, blocked his number, blocked Margaret's, blocked Evan's email. Then something unexpected happened. A voicemail came through from a number I didn't recognize. A soft, trembling voice. Dear Claire, this is Eleanor, Evan's grandmother. My chest tightened immediately. I'd always liked her. She was gentle, sharp-witted, the kind of woman who saw through pretension and found it boring. I heard what happened, she said, and I'm mortified. What my daughter and son-in-law did was disgraceful. I sat down slowly. You didn't deserve that, she continued, and neither did your parents. I just wanted you to know, some of us in this family have better values than what you witnessed. I called her back. We talked for 15 minutes. She apologized again. She said, they've always thought too highly of themselves. When we hung up, I cried, not because I wanted to go back, but because someone had finally said the words I needed to hear without asking me to forgive anyone. That conversation gave me closure, but it didn't change what needed to happen next, because the damage was already done. And now it was time for consequences to unfold, without me lifting a finger. The silence after the cease and desist was immediate. Not gradual, not hesitant, immediate. No more calls to my parents. No more attempts to access my accounts. No more mysterious inquiries to HR. Either they'd finally realized they were standing on legal quicksand, or their attorney had taken one look at the documentation and told them to stop before they destroyed themselves completely. For the first time since the rehearsal dinner, my nervous system began to unclench. But peace didn't arrive all at once. It arrived in fragments. I started sleeping through the night again. Not well, not deeply, but without jolting awake every hour, convinced my phone was about to buzz with another threat disguised as concern. I went back to work fully, burying myself in schematics and deadlines. My job had always been my anchor. Numbers, systems, logic, problems that made sense. And then, about a week after the cease and desist landed, something unexpected happened. I started hearing things. Not directly, secondhand. A friend who still moved in Evan's social orbit texted carefully, like she was testing ice. Hey, just so you know, people are talking. About, I asked. About them. Apparently, Richard had invited several business associates to the rehearsal dinner. People he wanted to impress. People he wanted watching his family, his status, his success. Instead, they watched him publicly humiliate his future daughter-in-law. One of those people sat on the board of the nonprofit Margaret ran. He didn't complain. He didn't accuse. He simply mentioned, at a board meeting, that he'd been surprised by the family's conduct at a recent event, that it raised concerns about judgment and leadership. That single comment opened a door, which led to another conversation, then another. Margaret wasn't removed from her role, but she was encouraged to take a temporary sabbatical to focus on family matters. A polite phrase for, you embarrassed us. Step back. Richard's consequences were quieter, but sharper. One of those same dinner guests had been considering partnering with him on a consulting venture for retired executives, a lucrative one. After the dinner, he pulled out, told someone he couldn't work with a man who treated people like that in public. The deal died. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I felt validated because I hadn't asked for revenge. I hadn't campaigned. I hadn't said a word. I'd simply refused to absorb their cruelty in silence, and the world had done the rest. Evan tried once more. 2 weeks after everything went quiet, I found a handwritten letter in my mailbox. No return address. 4 pages. I recognized the handwriting immediately. He apologized again. Explained his family dynamic, his fear, his therapy sessions, how he'd been raised to defer, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace at all costs. He admitted he'd failed me, that he should have defended me, that he'd never forgive himself. He asked for one meeting, just coffee, just to say goodbye properly. I didn't open the letter again for 2 days. When I finally responded, my reply was short. I received your letter. I appreciate the apology, and I hope therapy helps you become the person you want to be. But I can't meet with you, not because I'm angry, but because there's nothing left to say. I needed you to stand up for me, and you didn't. That moment showed me who you were, and I can't unsee it. I wish you well, genuinely. Please don't contact me again. I mailed it. That was 10 days ago. Nothing since. The money situation worked itself out as well as it could. Vendor credits, resold decorations, grace period cancellations. I still lost about $17,000. That stings, but I'm employed, healthy, untangled. That's a win. My parents stayed a few extra days before going home. My mom still calls every other day. My dad texts me random sports commentary like nothing ever happened. His way of saying, I'm here. The townhouse feels different now. I donated everything Evan picked out, repainted the bedroom, rearranged the furniture. It's mine again. I'm not dating. Not interested. My therapist says that's healthy, sitting with the feelings instead of sprinting toward a distraction. Some nights I still think about the future I thought I was building. The wedding that never happened. The life that dissolved in a single speech. But then I remember the silence. His silence. Their silence. And I know I made the right choice. People always ask about regret. They ask it gently, like they're trying not to reopen a wound, but the question is still sharp. Do you ever wonder if you could have handled it differently? Maybe confronted them privately? Given Evan more time to make it right? I used to replay those questions in my head late at night, when the apartment was too quiet and my thoughts were louder than the refrigerator hum. But here's the truth I eventually landed on. Evan had 4 years. 4 years of small moments that mattered more than that rehearsal dinner ever could. Every holiday where his mother commented on my background like it was a curiosity. Every dinner where his father questioned whether I could really provide. Every time I swallowed discomfort so Evan wouldn't have to feel torn between me and them. Those were chances. Thousands of them. And he didn't take a single one. Not until the consequences were already irreversible. That's not love. That's convenience. And I refuse to spend my life being someone's acceptable compromise. About 3 weeks after everything finally went quiet, I ran into someone at the grocery store, one of Evan's distant relatives. Not close enough to have taken sides. Not invested enough to lie convincingly. She hesitated when she saw me, then said, I'm sorry about how everything went down. I nodded. They really messed up, she added. People saw it. More people than you think. That mattered more than she probably realized. Because for a while, I'd worried that the narrative would stick, that I'd always be the woman who overreacted. But truth has a way of surviving without your help, especially when 40 witnesses are involved. Evan's parents got what they wanted, sort of. They broke up the wedding, but they also exposed themselves. They damaged their social standing. They stalled Margaret's foundation work. They lost Richard a lucrative opportunity. And they pushed their son into therapy, not because he was brave, but because he'd finally felt the cost of silence. Congratulations, I guess. As for me, I'm okay. Not euphoric, not devastated, just okay. Which, considering everything, is pretty damn good. The townhouse no longer feels like a shared space haunted by plans that never happened. It feels lived in again, honest, mine. My savings will take time to rebuild, but I have a stable job and a clear head. I sleep better. I trust myself more. And I've learned something I wish I'd known earlier. When someone shows you who they are, especially in silence, believe them. Love isn't just about affection. It's about defense. About choosing someone even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. Evan couldn't do that. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. So no, I don't regret walking out. I regret staying quiet for as long as I did. To everyone who reached out with support, Thank you, truly. Knowing strangers had my back when the people who were supposed to love me didn't, that mattered more than you know. I'm moving forward now, one day at a time, with my dignity intact. And that to me is the real win.